You wake up in the middle of the night. You can't move. You can't scream. And in the corner of the room, something is watching you. This is not a dream. This is sleep paralysis. And what you're about to hear will make you afraid to close your eyes tonight. Chapter 1. The Midnight Prison. It starts with a sound you can't quite place. A faint, steady rhythm, like someone breathing. Slow, deliberate. Your eyes open, but the darkness in the room is heavy, pressing. You try to roll over, to reach for your phone, but nothing happens. Your body does not respond. Your arms, your legs, they're frozen. The breathing is closer now. You're sure of it. You want to call out, to shout for help, but your mouth won't move. Not a sound escapes. Your chest feels tight, as if a weight is pressing you into the mattress. Your mind races. You remember going to bed a little after midnight. You were tired, but not exhausted. You fell asleep quickly. Now, somehow, you're awake, but it's a different kind of awake. You can see the faint outline of your room, the dresser in the corner, the doorway slightly ajar, but everything feels wrong. And then you notice it. In the far corner, near the shadowed doorway, something is standing. It's tall, unmoving. No features you can clearly make out, but you know it's looking at you. Even in the dark, you can feel its gaze. The breathing stops. The silence is worse. Every instinct you have is screaming, move, now. But you can't. Your heart is hammering in your chest, so hard you wonder if it can hear it. The figure begins to shift, not walking exactly, more like gliding. It closes the distance between you in seconds. The air feels heavier. You can feel the temperature drop. Your skin prickles as if a cold wind just passed over you. But the room is still. It leans closer. You can't see eyes, but you feel watched, studied. And then you understand something terrifying. This isn't just a bad dream. You're not in a story. You're in your own bedroom, fully conscious, and something is here with you. You try to scream again. Nothing. Your chest feels crushed. You think about the possibility that you're dying, that this is what it feels like to take your last breath. Seconds stretch into minutes. You feel trapped inside your own skin. The figure hovers near your bed, as if waiting. And then, without warning, it's gone. The weight lifts. You gasp, dragging in air like you've been underwater. Your body moves again. You sit up, heart still pounding, eyes darting around the room. But nothing is there. The clock says 3:14 a.m. You turn on the light and stay that way until sunrise. For most people, this would sound like a ghost story, a nightmare you wake from with relief. But you know better. You were awake. Your senses were sharp. You could hear every creak of the house, feel the texture of the blanket under your fingers. What you just experienced is something millions of people around the world know all too well. Sleep paralysis. It doesn't matter where you live, how old you are, or what language you speak. The experience is hauntingly similar. You wake up, you can't move, you can't speak, and very often, you are not alone. Sleep paralysis isn't rare. Experts estimate about 1 in 5 people will experience it at least once in their lives. For some, it's a single strange night. For others, it's a recurring event that shapes the way they sleep, or avoid sleep. The most unsettling part, the presence you feel isn't random. People describe figures, shadowy shapes, strange beings, even human-like creatures that seem aware of them. And while science explains much of it as a trick of the brain, many say it feels far too real to dismiss. That's why this phenomenon is sometimes called the midnight prison. You are fully awake inside your mind, but your body is locked. You can see, hear, and feel, but you cannot move. It's a state where fear takes over, and every second feels longer than the last. In this chapter, we've walked through just one example, but the stories repeat across cultures, centuries, and continents, and they carry the same details that make your skin crawl. Why do so many people see the same shadowy presence? Why do so many describe the same pressure on their chest, the same cold air, the same unblinking watch from the corner of the room? Science has its theories, and we'll explore them soon. But before we get to the medical explanations, it's worth remembering this. When you're the one lying there, frozen in the dark, none of that matters. You're not thinking about REM cycles or brain chemistry. You're thinking about survival. And that's where the fear takes root. In the next chapter, we'll step away from the shadows and into the lab, to uncover what's actually happening inside your body and brain during sleep paralysis. But for now, ask yourself, if your mind knows you're awake, and your body refuses to move, who or what is moving in the dark? Chapter 2. What sleep paralysis really is. Most people think of sleep as an on-off switch. You're either awake or you're asleep. But the truth is, sleep is a complex cycle. And in that cycle, strange things can happen when the brain and body get out of sync. Sleep paralysis is one of those strange things. It usually happens in two moments. When you're falling asleep, called hypnagogic paralysis, or when you're waking up, called hypnopompic paralysis. In both cases, your brain is active enough to be aware of your surroundings, but your body is still locked in a state of muscle atonia, the natural paralysis that prevents you from acting out your dreams. In normal sleep, this paralysis is a good thing. It's your brain's safety system. Without it, you might run, punch, or kick while dreaming. But during sleep paralysis, that safety system lingers too long, trapping you between sleep and wakefulness. The science behind the fear when your mind wakes before your body does. Your senses turn on, but they don't always agree with each other. Your eyes may be open, but your brain is still in a dreamlike state. It starts blending reality with fragments of your dreams. This is where hallucinations come in, and they aren't just visual. Some people hear footsteps, whispers, or the sound of doors opening. Others feel pressure on their chest, hands gripping their shoulders, or a weight settling onto the bed. This happens because your brain is trying to make sense of incomplete information. It senses that something is wrong, that you can move or speak, and it pulls from your deepest instincts, fight or flight. Except here, you can do neither. Why the hallucinations are so dark, you might wonder. If it's just the brain mixing dream images with reality, why aren't the hallucinations pleasant? Why don't people see flowers or friendly faces? Scientists believe it comes down to survival instincts. In moments of paralysis, your brain interprets the inability to move as a threat. Your heart rate rises, your breathing becomes shallow, and your senses are on high alert. This fear state makes your mind more likely to create threatening shapes and sounds, not comforting ones. That's why across cultures, people report shadow figures, demons, and intruders, beings that feel dangerous, even if they never actually touch you. The numbers sleep paralysis affects about 20% of the population at least once in their lifetime. For most, it's rare. For a smaller group, it's frequent, happening several times a month, or even several times a week. It can happen to anyone, but certain factors raise the risk. Irregular sleep schedules, sleeping on your back, stress and anxiety, narcolepsy or other sleep disorders. Even without these factors, it can still strike without warning. Inside the experience, imagine this. You open your eyes in the dark. You're aware of your room, the air, the faint glow from a streetlight outside, but your chest is heavy. You try to lift your arm, nothing. You try to turn your head, still nothing. Then you notice a shadow by the door. You can't hear it moving, but it's closer every time you blink. This is how the brain's confusion becomes fear. You can't test reality by moving. You can't reach for a light switch. You can't call for help. Your only source of information is your mind, and your mind is still halfway in a dream. Theories beyond science. Most doctors see sleep paralysis as a harmless, if unsettling, event. But not everyone agrees it's only in the mind. Some researchers note that the most common hallucinations, the shadow figure, the feeling of a presence, the sensation of pressure, are reported in ancient folklore across the globe. In Japan, it's called kanoshibari, meaning bound or fastened in metal. In Newfoundland, Canada, people speak of the old hag, a witch who sits on your chest. In parts of the Middle East, it's described as a jinn attack. These stories existed long before modern science. The descriptions match so closely that it raises the question, are we all just wired to imagine the same fears? Or is something else visiting us in that vulnerable state? Why it feels so real when you wake from a normal dream, you can tell it wasn't real. The details fade quickly, but sleep paralysis memories stay sharp. You can recall the exact angle of a shadow, the sound of a breath, the weight on your chest. This clarity is what makes so many people believe they experienced something supernatural. And here's the unsettling part. The fear doesn't fade when the episode ends. People often stay awake for hours afterward, lights on, afraid to fall back into the same state. Some avoid sleeping altogether for nights at a time. A double-edged condition medically. Sleep paralysis doesn't cause physical harm. You're not suffocating, and you're not actually in danger. But psychologically, it can leave a mark. Recurring episodes can trigger anxiety, insomnia, and even panic attacks at bedtime. The fear of meeting the shadow again becomes a constant background tension. The human brain is powerful, capable of creating whole worlds in dreams. But in sleep paralysis, that power turns inward, trapping you inside your own fear. Science offers a neat explanation, but when it happens to you, explanations don't matter. All you can think about is the figure at the edge of your bed, waiting for you to open your eyes again. In the next chapter, we'll step outside the lab and into the archives of history, to see how cultures across the world have been telling the same chilling story for centuries. Chapter 3. The universal demon. No matter where you live or what language you speak, the stories sound the same. You wake up, you can't move, and you feel it, the presence. It's not always visible at first. Sometimes it lingers in the corner of the room, watching. Other times, it's right next to the bed, leaning over you. But across continents, across centuries, people describe it the same way. Dark, human-shaped, and filled with intent. Legends from around the world. Long before the term sleep paralysis existed, cultures had names for this experience. And what's remarkable is how closely those names match in meaning. Japan, Kanashi. The word translates to bound or fastened in metal. The belief was that an unseen spirit pinned you down, holding you motionless, while it loomed over you. Newfoundland, Canada. The old hag here. People spoke of a witch-like figure who sits on your chest while you sleep, crushing the breath from your lungs. Even today, some older residents still warn about the old hag, visiting those who are careless at bedtime. Middle East. Jinn attacks. In Islamic tradition, jinn are supernatural beings capable of influencing humans. Some believe waking paralysis is the result of a jinn sitting on your chest or standing at your bedside. Scandinavia. Mare rides. The word nightmare actually comes from mare, an evil spirit that would sit on sleepers and bring bad dreams. These stories have existed for hundreds, even thousands, of years, passed down through generations long before modern medicine had an explanation. The shared details. The most chilling thing about these legends is how much they overlap. They come from different continents, different belief systems, and different eras in history, but they describe the same sensations. Pressure on the chest, a dark figure, often faceless, the inability to move or speak, an overwhelming sense of fear or dread. It's not just the symptoms that are similar. Even the behavior of the visitor matches. It approaches slowly, it watches, and it rarely, if ever, speaks. Coincidence, or something else? Skeptics argue that these similarities exist because human brains are wired the same way. Under extreme fear, our minds create the same kinds of shapes and threats. But there's another possibility, one far more unsettling. What if the reason the descriptions are so similar is because people are experiencing the same thing? Not a random hallucination, but an encounter with something that exists outside our individual minds. Modern encounters. These old legends aren't just stories from the past. People still report seeing the same figure today. In 2011, a man in Ontario described waking up to see a shadow at the foot of his bed. He couldn't move, but he was sure it had glowing eyes. When he finally broke free from the paralysis, the figure was gone, but the room was ice cold. In Australia, a woman said she'd been visited by a tall, thin shadow wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. She'd never heard of this before, until she found online forums full of people describing the same hat man appearing during sleep paralysis. The fact that strangers from opposite sides of the world describe the same visitor is one of the reasons paranormal researchers take the phenomenon seriously. The shadow's many faces while the basic outline stays the same. The universal demon takes on variations. Some see a cloaked figure, others, a crawling creature. A few report an old woman with long hair. But here's the strange part. Even when details differ, the feeling is identical. That same deep, primal terror. that same certainty that the figure is aware of you and is here for a reason. Why it stays in our minds, dreams fade. Ghost stories get exaggerated over time, but sleep paralysis memories stay sharp for years. People can describe every detail, the angle of the shadow, the exact spot in the room, even the imagined sound of its breathing. Some researchers believe this is because the brain is in a hyper-aware state during the episode. The fear imprints the moment like a trauma, locking it into long-term memory. This might explain why these legends survived for so long. A single terrifying night can leave a mark so deep that it gets passed down as a warning to children, generation after generation. When science and folklore overlap, doctors explain sleep paralysis as a glitch in the sleep cycle. Folklore explains it as a supernatural attack. But in this case, the two versions aren't entirely at odds. Science admits that it can't explain why the visions are so consistent, or why the presence feels so real. Folklore admits that not every shadow is a spirit. Sometimes it's just the mind playing tricks. This leaves us in a strange middle ground, where the logical and the unexplainable meet. The universal demon may have different names, but it's the same nightmare walking through different doors. Whether it's Kanashibari, the old hag, a djinn, or the mayor, the story is always the same. You're trapped, you can't move, and something is in the room with you. In the next chapter, we'll look at where science stops, and where the supernatural theories begin. We'll examine the cases that blur the line, and the moments that make even skeptics hesitate before turning off the light. Chapter 4. When darkness plays tricks on your mind. Darkness is not just the absence of light, it's a stage. And in that stage, your brain becomes the director, the actors, and the special effects team, all at once. When you're in total darkness, the brain's visual system goes into overdrive, trying to make sense of the emptiness. Without real input from your eyes, it starts pulling from memories, fears, and imagination to fill in the blanks. That's when the shadows start to move, even if nothing is there. Psychologists call these visual hallucinations, but that name doesn't quite capture the feeling. It's not like watching a dream. You feel like you're seeing reality. Maybe it's a faint glow in the corner, a shifting shape on the wall, a flicker of movement that vanishes when you turn your head. These experiences can escalate quickly. In deep, uninterrupted darkness, your brain can even create full scenarios, faces emerging from the black, walls that seem to breathe, or whispers that feel inches from your ear. One common phenomenon is called the presence illusion. People report sensing another being in the room, standing silently, just beyond the edge of perception. You can't see them, you can't hear them, but you know they're there. It's an ancient survival reflex. Humans evolved to be hyper-aware in low-light conditions, ready to detect predators. But in absolute darkness, that instinct turns inward, amplifying every sound and sensation until it feels like something is stalking you. Some people freeze when it happens. Others panic, thrashing in the dark, trying to find light at any cost. But here's the chilling part: your brain doesn't always let you escape. Even when the lights come on, some people say the feeling lingers, as if whatever was in the dark followed them back into the light. Darkness, in this way, is not just an absence. It becomes an active force, one that rewires how you think, feel, and even move. And the longer you stay in it, the more control it takes. The question is, if your mind can create such vivid experiences in the dark, how do you ever know what's real? Chapter 5. When the darkness becomes too real, most people assume the strange sensations in the dark are harmless tricks of the mind. But there are cases documented and chilling where something else seems to happen. One such case took place in an underground research facility in Eastern Europe. A group of volunteers was placed in total darkness for extended periods to study sensory deprivation. The room was silent. The walls were padded. There was no light, no clock, no way to track time. At first, participants reported the expected effects: disorientation, floating sensations, and phantom lights dancing in the void. But then, one by one, they began describing the same thing. They all claimed that after a certain number of hours, they became aware of a figure standing in the corner, a tall, motionless silhouette. No facial features, no movement, just watching. The unsettling part: they each described it in almost identical detail, without having spoken to one another. The scientists dismissed it as a shared psychological reaction. But then came the moment that still chills them to this day. One participant screamed, insisting that the figure had moved closer. Others began shouting, saying they could feel it breathing near them. Panic erupted. The experiment ended immediately. What made the incident harder to explain was what happened afterward. Several participants reported that, even outside the lab, they could still see the figure for days. Not constantly, but often in the corner of a room, or reflected faintly in a dark window at night. The official reports never mentioned anything beyond stress-related hallucinations, but the lead researcher quietly resigned and refused to speak about the project again. If this was simply the brain playing tricks, why did the visions follow them into the light? And if it wasn't, what exactly had been in that room? Chapter 6: The Point of No Return. Every strange story has a breaking point, the moment when curiosity turns into something else. A moment when you realize you've gone too far. For one Canadian hiker, that moment came in the remote forests of British Columbia. She had been documenting her solo trip online, posting short videos of the trails, the mountain views, and her campfire meals. But on the fourth night, her tone changed. The videos became quiet, short, almost hurried. In one clip, her voice was barely above a whisper. She said she had started hearing something outside her tent after dark, first distant steps, then slow, deliberate breathing. She thought it was a bear, until she heard what she described as a low humming that seemed almost human. By the next day, she admitted she hadn't slept. She planned to cut her trip short, but there was one final video never posted publicly that was found on her camera weeks later. It was just 30 seconds long. The camera was aimed at the trees. You could hear her breathing, tense and uneven. Then, the faint humming started again. Slowly, a shape appeared between the trunks, still narrow, unmoving. The clip ended abruptly. Her gear was found neatly packed near the trail. She was never seen again. The authorities treated it as a missing person case. But those who've seen the footage say it's not the kind of thing you forget. And maybe that's the real danger with stories like these. Once you've heard them once, you've imagined what might be waiting in the dark. They never fully leave you. So, the next time you find yourself in the stillness of the night, ask yourself, is it just your mind, or has something already found you?